Okay, you may want to turn on your camera, as it would be lovely to see you all, but please do understand that this session is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. So if you don't want to have yourself on these, please switch off your camera. Anyway, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this SAE Master Session, where we'll be talking about an awesome game titled DARQ. My name is Mehdi Benkirane, and I'm active as a business development manager at Remote Control Productions. For those of you who do not know us, we are Europe's largest developer family with 10 game development studios. And my job is to position the studio's own projects as well as bringing in work for hire and co-dev assignments for them in collaboration with global publishers. Incidentally, this is precisely how our panelists tonight actually got to work together. So please, if your camera is on, give us a horn and help me welcome Scott Millard, Managing Director at Feardemic, publisher of the game we'll be talking about tonight. Thank you very much for that. Hi, Scott. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And also, please put your hands together for Joni Lapalainen, CEO at Dreamloop Games, proud member of the RCP family, who also actually have worked on DARQ by porting the game to consoles. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, so for those of you who do not know DARQ, DARQ was actually created by Vlad Marhulets of Unfold Games, which is a studio based in Los Angeles, California, and was first released on Steam and got phenomenal reviews very quickly. Its unique style and very creative gameplay paired with brilliant music and sound effects have earned the game multiple nominations, as well as winning many prizes. So on December 4th of this very year, yes, this very month, the complete game went live on Microsoft Xbox One and Sony PS4, thanks to the running collaboration between these gentlemen from Feardemic and Dreamloop Games, as well as, of course, the brain behind the game, Unfold Games. The game will also be released on other platforms next year, but before we jump onto that, the purpose of this panel, let's take a quick look at the release trailer. Cue trailer, please. Awesome. So if you haven't played the game, strongly encourage you to give it a shot. So the purpose of tonight's panel is to actually revisit the story behind the game and how the game was picked by Feardemic as a publisher and the processes and working relationships with a third-party developer, i.e. in this case Dreamloop Games, who took over the porting of the game to consoles. The panel will last approximately 45 minutes. And we will allow about 15 minutes on top for some questions you might have. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's get started with Scott. So Scott, can you please very briefly tell us who Scott Millard is and who Feardemic is? Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Mehdi. And well, I'll start with Feardemic because it's a much younger subject than I am, so it would be much quicker to start there. But Feardemic is a specialist publisher, and we specialize in the vertical of horror games. So the only type of content that we publish are horror games, and of course we publish on all different platforms. We are part of a larger group of companies, the Bloober team group. And the best way, I suppose, to differentiate the two, even though that we have the same owner, is that Bloober Team develop and publish their own games, whereas Feardemic publish third-party games or games created by other publishers such as Unfold Games. So, and the Feardemic project has been around for around probably about 2 years, probably a little longer than that. And so far we've released about 5 different SKUs. We are aggressively investing in titles to release over the coming years. And yeah, it's quite exciting. And I suppose one of the other differences between Bloober Team and Feardemic is that our Bloober Team is very much psychological horror. They have a very distinct style of games, whereas at Feardemic, we take the definition of horror a little differently, and we can, experiment a little bit with games that appeal to various different types of audiences, even though they have, that horror element as front and center.
Awesome, thank you. And what about yourself, Scott?
What's
your story?
Okay, pull up a cup of tea. So essentially, I've been in the games industry for a very long time, and I got my start in the days of 16-bit. And oddly enough, I'll share this because this is the School of Audio Engineering. Well, that's where it sort of kind of started from. But I was actually in the music business for many years before ending up in games. And it was around the time of the HMVs and the Brash stores and all the big sort of music supermarkets, music marts sort of started moving into the games section. And because I had all these relationships in sales, I was acquired by a company called Sega, who were moving all their goods into those channels. And I've been with the games industry pretty much ever since. And it's been a really interesting experience. And strangely enough, or not strangely enough, most of the people that I know within the games industry, well, a lot of people in the games industry have a connection with music somehow. You can always find a connection. And not the least Vlad Mohalets, who, he's a really well-known composer of music, and he's, composed some, for TV shows, for movies, for various other events. I mean, his music has been played all over the world. And one that, us in the games industry know is, of course, Hitman. So he composed music for that. But getting back to me, from Sega, the company was bought by another company called Infogrames. Then they changed their name to Atari, then was sold to Namco Bandai, and I ended up as managing director of Namco Bandai in Southeast Asia and Korea. And then leaving there, set up my own consultancy to help set up some distribution channels for, it was Bethesda at the time, and also Turtle Beach. And more recently, of course, I found myself in Europe and, building Feardemic, which is quite a rewarding challenge, if you put it that way. It really is dealing with multimedia in a way that, you can only find in the games industry. It's sort of, it has all the elements of the entertainment business, and, nearly every type of media that you can think of, whether it be film components, computer components, musical components, everything, all pushed into one business. And that's what makes it so much fun.
Wow, I mean, I thought I'd been around the block. Well, thank you very much.
That's one way of putting it. Thank you.
Wow. Fantastic. All right, thank you very much. So, Yanni, what about yourself? Can you please tell us a bit more about yourself and about Dreamloop games?
Yeah, so if I go in the other order than Scott here, so I'll start to talk about myself, because that's, I think, more easily put together. I basically been here living in Finland my whole life. I took the benefit of Finnish education system, free education system, that I got myself 3 university degrees, worked a little, and then formed Dreamloop Games 5.5 years ago. So Dreamloop Games is basically I think at the moment we have like 15 people, and we've been working over 20 game projects in the past 5 years. And we're located here in Tampere, you know, the second biggest kind of like a city of gaming in Finland, just after Helsinki. Well, we don't have Supercell making 2 billion a year, but it's a hard place to compete. But yeah, Dreamloop has been around very actively here. We also been trying to push as a whole team this whole game industry forward, and we joined RCP as a family studio back in 2017, I think.
That's correct.
Yeah, 2017, early 2017, and been working with a lot of great clients like Feardemic ever since.
Thank you very much for that. Awesome. Thank you very much, Johnny. So, gentlemen, I suggest we get started with the beginning. Obviously, between the two of you, Scott, you've had the chance of working with Vlad, you know, a bit longer. So maybe we could start with you, with one question to you, Scott. So how, to the best of your knowledge, of course, how did the game, you know, come to be? You know, and why did Feardemic actually choose to sign it as a publisher?
Yeah, so there's kind of two questions there, but I suppose the first one, just in regards to how DARQ came to be. Vlad has actually written a book which you can find on Amazon, and it's called How to Just. Well, I'll share the title. It's called Game Dev, essentially. There is a longer title. It's called Game Dev, everything you need to know about releasing your, making and releasing your first game. And there is the first chapter actually goes into a bit of Vlad's history. And wow, he's got an amazing story. And that story sort of spans, you know, from here in Poland, where I am at the moment, to the USA, to New York, to Julian's music school there, the most prestigious music school in all of the world, I suppose. It's been, you know, held up as on a journey that's taken him to Hollywood to make or score films, and that journey sort of at some point it was a personal ambition for him to make his own game. And what was so amazing about this story is that essentially he downloaded Unity one day and said, I'm going to do it. And you know, he taught himself how Unity works. He taught himself all the programming. He taught himself how to do it. Had a few starts where he had to start all over again because he realized he'd done it in the wrong way. He scored it himself. Of course, he, you know, had some, you know, amazing help along the way from people that he knew, or people that he was able to build relationships with. But you know, generally, most of it he did himself.
Fantastic.
And this is, of course, all before I ever knew anything about DARQ. I mean, my first sighting of DARQ was in the trending list of Steam. It was released in towards the end of, I think it was
2018, I believe.
No, or 2019. So I think it was August 2019. I should have the date, but I'm sorry, I don't. But it was towards the last half of 2019, and of course I saw it trending in the the best-selling list, and that sort of kind of got me really curious about the title. So I did some Google searching and found that a couple of posts on the fact that he'd rejected 15, 20 publishers. And so I decided I didn't want to get rejected. So I just kind of left it. But towards the beginning of 2020, before everything just sort of kind of went a bit pear-shaped, we had kind of decided that in Feardemic, one of the things that we wanted to do was to create a range of physical games or collectible games on PlayStation and on Switch. We recognize that, you know, horror fans or fans of horror games love to collect things, and the Bloober team have been very, very successful through various sort of programs on physical titles. So we thought this is one area where we could really sort of excel in, and so we had lined up some partners to help us in our endeavors. Talked to Nintendo and Sony and worked at how we're going to do it. And I approached Vlad for that and that only, for releasing his product in physical games. Okay. Now, 2020 conspired against us when it came to physical, because, you know, everything sort of kind of became very hard to sort of read because shops were being shut down and everything. So that kind of didn't pan out the way we wanted it to. However, during this process, I was very surprised when Vlad turned around and said, well, how about you publish all the physical and the digital as well? Of course, we said, absolutely, we would love to. So it was a real no-brainer for us. And then, you know, it just came down to working out how we were going to do that. And then, you know, we searched high and low to find somebody, because I mean, you know, I was hoping that we could do it internally, do all the ports internally, but it just wasn't going to happen. We have too many projects going, and we just did not have the bandwidth. So for the first time, we sort of had to look outside of the immediate family of companies that usually work with Bloober Team. And you know, it wasn't just it wasn't just Dark either. It was another title in the Bloober Team family that needed porting. So we looked outside of the family for the first time, and through, you know, chance and, you know, knowing Mehdi, we came across Dreamloop, and what a fortunate turn of events that was. So I'm sure Yoni will be able to, you know, add some more light onto the process. But you know, it's been an absolute Dreamloop, really aptly named company. Let me tell you, it has really been a dream to work with them. It's been really easy. So that's kind of like the you know, how you know, Dark came to be published by Feardemic, even though you know, the PC isn't, but all the PlayStation and Xbox and Switch SKUs are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So obviously, you know, Scott, as you were saying, you know, you first spotted Dark, you know, as part of the best-selling sort of, you know, list on Steam. And then obviously, you know, as you familiarize yourself with the title, you know, this somewhat reinforced your conviction that this game would be indeed, you know, something very good to add to the Feardemic catalog. But Yoni, for you, I mean, obviously, you know, when you were first approached with Dark as, you know, as a potential project for you and your team to port to consoles, what would you say you like best about the game?
You're gonna be kidding me. I mean, it's dark and isolated. Why would a Finnish studio not love something like that? You have to understand, we get 15 hours of sunlight during December, so it hit home. And I mean, you know, some of the you know, characters look exactly the same as what I see in front of the pub every night. But joking aside, I mean, our team really loved the art style and the soundscape of that game, and also we do have some heart here for horror games internally with the team as well. So it was a really good fit, and especially the more we started to look into Vlad and Unfold games, the more we, you know, felt like we want to work with this title. And yeah, I guess that's kind of like where we found the you know, I cannot really say that what we liked the most, because the more we went into it, the more we liked about it. Well, we get to the technical parts that we did not like about the game project later on, but that's kind of like our side to work on consoles.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that. Okay, great. Actually, I would like to sort of build on, you know, follow up on the previous question that I asked you, Scott. You know, because maybe some people here in the call, or even, you know, viewers on YouTube, might want to sort of find out a bit more about that process. But obviously, you described how you came across Dark and the process, and how you reached out to Vlad, and, you know, and then eventually this whole thing happened. But just for the audience out there, what does a publisher like you, like Feardemic, look for in a game, and even or a team prior to, you know, possibly signing a project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's one that we get asked all the time, and you know, there's really no rules, because essentially every, you know, sometimes you find games on the show floor at a developer conference. Obviously this year that hasn't been possible. Sometimes you find games from just, you know, scouring the internet, and other times you find them on Steam or or in, you know, articles of lists of games, etc. And you know, it's a combination of feeling. It's a combination of looking at you know, performance, trying to ascertain what, you know, how big that community is, what the sales have been. In the case of Dark, I mean, it wasn't you know, all just, oh, this looks nice. There was a little bit of research, and based on, you know, what the traffic had been, what the community size of the community is, and the community was huge. Vlad had built this enormous community. Also, his sales were incredibly solid, as much as we could ascertain anyway from looking on tools such as Steam Spy, or asking people who are good at sort of estimating these things. But but that's not always the case. Sometimes, you know, you really come across something that you just really like, and you've got to take a punt, and you take a punt, and it either comes home for you or it doesn't. Sometimes you come across games that you know, and just even today we had one which was really strange, because back in August I'd said no to it. I'd said no. This is probably not really for us. Let's keep in contact and see, but, you know, I'll say, you know. And then today it turns up on IGN's, like most most sort of anticipated games for 2021, and I thought, wow, that was not a sensible sort of thing to do. But, you know, this is the great thing about the games business. There is no rules. There's no formula. I mean, if there was a formula to make a game successful, EA would have worked it out, and they'd be the only publisher, you know, and that's it. But, you know, no one knows what it is. Sometimes something happens that's magical, and you know, and again, you know, Dark is a great example of that. You know, it is a fairly straightforward concept. You know, it's solving puzzles and moving around in a sort of a world that sort of, you know, moves in multiple dimensions. But there's something about it, and this is sort of, you know, the thing that people strive to try and achieve, but not necessarily everyone can do it. It's that sort of magic that happens in the code, that happens in the art style, that happens in the backstory, that happens in, you know, the world that's imagined, that is so hard to do. And that's, I suppose, why we celebrate games that you know, actually find that sort of point of magic. And, you know, the chances of a publisher or a game developer actually achieving that first game that they do, that is really, really difficult. Usually in most games companies, whether they're in publishing, whether they're in development, whatever they do, it's a case of finding a team, working together, building the experience up, and then after a while, once, you know, everyone's so comfortable with working with each other, something happens that's magical, and suddenly you have this game that everyone goes, wow, this is amazing. It really doesn't happen for, you know, first cab off the rank. I think, you know, Bloober Team even, they were specialized in work for hire before Layers of Fear. So Layers of Fear was not the first game that they had anything to do with. In fact, that, you know, by the time they got to Layers of Fear, they were quite skilled. So, and I think, you know, if you delve into a lot of development studios, their history, you will find that is the case. The game that is big is not their first game; it's their second, third, fourth game in the mobile space. It can be their 10th game, 15th game. But so, you know, in answer to your question, finding games for a publisher is very, very difficult. It's a case of going out and looking, and then trying to work out whether it's going to be a fit for you. If it is a fit for you, whether or not it's going to work technically, whether or not it's going to be delivered, what the problems are going to be, and whether you think you can contribute to the overall sort of vision of that game.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I hope, this answer right here, I hope you've taken a few notes out there, and I know I certainly will be after this call, and I think Yoni is probably doing the same in his mind right now. But speaking about Yoni, I mean, obviously, as Scott was saying, Vlad developed the game. He taught himself how to code basically and how to use Unity, and then created the game. And then, Feardemic came in and signed a title and was not in a position to port the game internally with the various teams that they've worked with before, whether it's through Bloober or just purely Feardemic. But you, as a studio, Dreamloop, you've ported other titles before. And for those people out there who are unaware of the process, can you maybe walk us through the process of being selected as a porting partner for a game? So not necessarily, for this particular title, or do you feel that it is generally the same process? I would love to know what your take on this is.
Yeah, I mean, of course, nowadays for us, it makes a lot easier when we have ported multiple projects already. But when we only had few, it was quite different than it's now. But there's still some things that are always the same. Of course, most of our cases, publishers find us through our association, being part of the RCP family. And through RCP, we get to evaluate the games from the publishers. Usually we ask the source code or the project basically to then go into and see kind of like what are the pain points, do a little bit of profiling to see how it's running on PC with certain settings. Then we'll start to evaluate, like, based on what platforms. I mean, DARQ is all 5, so it's five platforms with different needs. We start to go through like how much this game would need per platform on rough ballpark estimations, and then basically bring up a timeline, go and start talking with the publisher, get more understanding on the project, what they see, how they see it, how the developer sees it, and then basically leave the paper on the table saying like, yeah, we can do this, and this is pretty much the time and budget that we're gonna need for it.
I mean, in this case, I know, for instance, that you've also spoken to the developer themselves, not just the publisher, right? Not just Feardemic. But would you say that is relatively standard out there when it comes to dealing with ports for publishers? Do you generally have a direct line to the developers as well, or what's your experience on that front?
So far, with all the projects that we've been working on, we have had the direct connection to the developer as well. In some cases, we've been working on the console version while the game was still in its alpha stage, which is sometimes for a lot of projects kind of like a good way to do it, especially if it's already known by that time that it's going to be a multi-platform title. Mm-hmm. But so far, we have been, lucky in a situation that we get to have a direct contact also for the developer, because in the end, they can tell you already when you're thinking like, why this one place is suddenly having such a huge spike on performance, and they tell like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, we hit something behind that wall. We're not showing it, but we're rendering it. I hope it's not a problem. So.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much for that. But then maybe as a follow-up to Scott, because obviously you were part of that process, right? That you know, the getting to know each other process with you know, with Dreamloop, and then obviously the whole interaction with Vlad at Unfold Games. So what would you say is key for a publisher and developer, right, when working with a third-party studio such as Dreamloop to port a game?
So that question's for me. Yes, it is. Yes. I think. Well, you know, look. Before we got to Dreamloop, actually, I had you know, gone and talked to, and I think I shared this with you previously, Mehdi, that I talked to, I think, about 20 different developers from Ukraine to Spain to France to the UK, even to South Africa. And all of them were all quite competent and seemed to be able to, you know, deliver. So, you know, I won't tell you that price didn't have a big role in it, because, you know, obviously it does. You know, at the top end of the town, you're going to have Unity directly. They'll do the port for you directly, but it will always be more expensive. But you know, you've got to balance off the price with competency. And the thing that kind of, I suppose, sold it for me for Dreamloop was the fact that they were part of you know, remote control. And I always knew that if we made it, if it turns out that we made the wrong choice and something happened, that the remote control, as being a network of different studios, would always be able to step in and find a solution to it. So that was a big part of it. So, you know, you know, there is a benefit to being a part of something bigger than yourself, because it gives people a lot of comfort dealing with you. But you know, luckily, I mean, you know, I think we've been extremely fortunate that Dreamloop have been, you know, technically, you know, outstanding, and, you know, that they were, you know, way ahead of the milestone schedule. At one point, the only thing that held us up was getting hold of dev kits, which was, you know, certainly not there, nothing to do with them or us. It was just the realities of 2020. But generally, it was such a smooth process. But, you know, I do think, I mean, and Johnny, maybe you can sort of comment on this. I do think that, you know, Dark was, you know, being programmed by one person as opposed to being programmed by 25 people, which I know there's another project that you're working on that was developed by a bigger team. I mean, was there a difference working between the two? With the fact that Vlad had done it all himself. So you kind of had one person's code versus 25 people's code.
Yeah, one really particular kind of like difference between these two projects is when you're working on a project that is, you know, a solo dev, you start to understand after a short while kind of the tendencies on situations when there's basically like one set of fingerprints instead of multiple. And it does help it out, but it also kind of keeps the scope like smaller when, you know, it is just a smaller game in general. But it's also way more like, you know, concise and has the one developer's DNA on it. So when you start to understand it, it's a lot easier than to also unravel the mysteries behind the code.
No, that's actually, thank you very much for that, Yanni, and Scott. Thank you very much for asking that question, because it kind of sort of dives into the very question I was gonna ask Yanni about, you know, possible challenges when it comes to porting a game. You know, for those out there who've never actually looked into other platforms other than the one that they're used to working on, what would you say, generally speaking, what are the most common challenges when porting a game? So not necessarily related to Dark here, but just in general.
I mean, it's always the one thing is that you're working on someone else's code. It's more often a curse than a blessing. But then it's really much the fact that all of these platforms are their own operating systems, which means that they have their own demands for, you know, how the game needs to operate on that platform. And those are quite extensive lists. And also the fact that these hardware of this, well, now past gen, started to be like 8 to 9 year old. And a lot of games made now are done with modern PCs in mind, and the hardware is totally different. So a lot of optimization goes into any porting projects that we've done in the past 2 years already. And then, of course, there's Switch, because even if I said that those two other platforms are like 8 to 9 years old, they're still way more like performance-wise better than what Switch is, which is then again a whole new level of optimization.
Mm-hmm.
Those, I think, are kind of like the biggest problems in general.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is kind of like, even if we would be working on our own project, or even if it would be Unity or Unreal. But yeah, I would say hardware and then the specifics on different platforms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so maybe just to follow up on sort of steering away from the technical challenges that obviously can be faced during the porting process, and depending, of course, on the scope of the game and the engine and everything else, and the quality of the code. This one's for you, Scott. How important is passion as a key driver in that process, in the creative process, from your perspective as a publisher?
Well, look, I think it's paramount. And getting back to what the point earlier, that magic that's in a game, that magic can only happen if there is a great deal of passion behind what it is. I mean, if you try and do something without that passion there, without that sort of single-minded focus on what the idea of this game is, well, then you're just going to end up with something that's quite flat, that doesn't have that magical point. If you say, as a publisher, have a game idea and go to a third party and say, can you make me this? And they will make you that. Mm-hmm. But will they be able to inject that magic in it? Will the passion be there, or will it just be a client, a client relationship where we deliver you what you say you want, you wanted? So that's kind of the difference between the two things. I always say to smaller developers, and when they're asking me about, we do want to publish our game, and it's like, well, what advice do you have for us? And sort of, well, make sure that you fall in love with this idea and you do everything you possibly can to make it happen, and be careful where you accept money from, because that money will change things. And if you if your project's too ambitious for the first time, and this relates to anything in the arts, right? If you want to make a movie, if you want to make a record, you want to make a game, if your first project's too ambitious, and you don't have the experience to hold it together and keep it focused on that one idea that drives the individuality of that game, or adds to that magic, it's going to be very, very difficult for you. And that, I suppose, again, going back to DARQ, was a huge advantage for Vlad, because it was his vision, and his vision alone, he was able to focus on that. And you see that as well with other people that work on games by themselves, and they're only maybe a tiny project, but you can see the passion there. You can see what the idea is. There's no sort of committee that they're trying to satisfy to move on to the next milestone. So I hope that answers your question, because again, it's a really, really difficult one. Getting back to the passion, the magic, the secret sauce. What is it? And it's really hard to put your finger on.
It does actually. But to be honest, thank you very much for that answer, because I'm actually going to put Yoni on a very tough spot with this follow-up question to Yoni right now. About, because you actually mentioned it yourself, Scott. You mentioned the guys at Dreamloop are working on another title as well that you're aware of. Mm-hmm. So obviously Dreamloop is a 14, 15 people, strong team, working on various projects at the same time, right? So how do you, for those out there who basically have a very small studio that they want to grow, or are, a solo developer that want to create their own studio, how do you organize the teams, and what processes do you have in-house to ensure that the teams are indeed passionate about the projects they're working on? Sorry, I know it's a bit of a tough question.
No, but it's a very fair question, because when you think about passion, it's like, you need to have it as a developer, because what was the last time that you did something well that you didn't care about?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's very fair question. And for us in Dreamloop, we have very much of this family mentality. We want to be kind of like group of friends working on same projects, and we very much keep like quite flat hierarchy. It's not exactly that you can have a lot of like, steps in hierarchy when you're only like under 20 people, but also we want to focus on the well-being of the individuals and have them the opportunities to take kind of like ownership on the projects that they're working on. We want to the well-being and kind of like the mental health of our developers is also very important part on our side. We try to avoid crunch like plague on our side. Even with Dark, we have been able to, well, keep it in very normal hours with the whole project. And also we want to, as a company, support our developers' mental health as much as possible. And in Finland, we are very glad that we have a very good like healthcare system to even support on that front, even during Corona. And also just like project management, so that the devs don't need to, end up in a situations where basically they've been burned out of their passion. In our team, we have 4 people in the management layer who are not developers themselves, trying to make sure that we can run these multiple projects at the same time, while still, keeping all the devs passionate and energized.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Wow. Great to hear that you've, that somehow throughout this very unusual year, you still managed to actually spare your team any form of, crunch, which, as we all know, is a very, very real problem in the games industry. Okay, guys, we're slowly getting closer to the end of our panel. So I'm just going to ask very quick questions. Scott, obviously DARQ is now, has gone live on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One on December 4th, this month, basically a couple of weeks ago. But what's next for the title? What are your plans?
Well, the next thing is the next gen consoles, of course, the PS5 and the Series X. That's kind of as well as Switch. So those are coming in January. We would have loved to have, released them all this month, but like a lot of other studios or like in the games business at the moment, I mean, getting hold of those dev kits were extremely sort of difficult. I think both Sony and Microsoft had supply issues. 2020 conspired again to make it very difficult to move things around and manufacture stuff. So, that sort of set our plans back. And then after that, I think there'll be sort of a few more surprises from Unfold. The most recent announcement that they had was the unveiling of the Unfold Games Awards, which is a really ambitious, really fantastic initiative for independent games developers. And, I really suggest if anyone's listening that is developing a game, check it out, because there's some fantastic prizes in there and incentives to enter and be part of it. And also there's a comic coming, which is going to be pretty interesting, basically expanding on Lloyd's world. And, I'm pretty confident. I mean, that DARQ is, going to be what we refer to in the publishing game as an evergreen title for us, that, every month there will be, something going on and some reason to buy it. It's a interesting game in that, we were talking about putting it on multiple different platforms, and the fact that the more people that play it, the more people want to buy it. It seems that for every 10 people that play the game, and just need to follow the Twitter feeds to see this. For every 10 people that play the game, 9 of them recommend it to somebody else, and 9 of the people, other people go out and buy it. It's kind of like in the world of horror and platformers, it's kind of like Rayman. It's like it will just go on and on and on and on and on. It's got a certain timelessness about it, the next being part of on the next gen platforms will kind of future-proof it a little bit, so that it will continue being a game that people want to play and explore, years from now. So yeah, I hope that sort of answers the what's next part.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I obviously know for a fact that Dreamloop is indeed going to be working on the next gen versions of Dark, and and obviously everybody's super excited about that. But Yoni, obviously everybody has to start somewhere, right? And effectively this is going to be Dreamloop's first next gen project, right? So how, in your opinion, how can studios in general jump on that bandwagon? I mean, is it relatively easy to just basically go, all right, I know PS4, so I'll be fine with PS5? Or how would you, what is your opinion on the matter?
Well, I would say it's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple to get to their developer websites and start the process of getting yourself to be a developer on their platform, to kind of start to take the steps towards the dev kits that are quite hard to get at the moment, and still will be probably for some time. But it is simple. All the platforms have very good guidance nowadays. So if you're in the studio, like some of the ones that I'm actually coaching and mentoring as part of the Finnish game incubator, if you are planning to go on consoles, which I always highly suggest, you can start by basically going to the platforms like developer websites, and they have very clear guides on how to start moving forward so that you can get your game on those platforms. And you can do that already before you have the publisher, because with that you already then would have the dev kits at your office by the time when you're moving forward with your publisher to a situation where you start to push it towards a multi-platform launch.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. We've reached the planned duration of the panel. I obviously still have 1,000,001 questions for you, but I'd like to actually open the floor to the audience out there, to the viewers here in this call, also to people who are watching the stream live on YouTube. So before we do that, so just to recap, if you haven't tried Dark, check it out. It's on Steam, it's on PS4, and it's on Xbox One. If you're a Switch or next-gen gamer, then bear with Dreamloop, Feardemic, and Unfold. It's happening. It is going to happen next year. And needless to say, you might have a few questions, directed at Feardemic themselves, or even at Dreamloop themselves. So please feel free to fire away, whether it's through chat or on the YouTube stream. Okay, I see that there's one question that came through the YouTube. Oh, sorry, hang on, sorry. Domi Tejic raised his hand. Can we please unmute Domi and have him ask his question?
Hi there. I have a question regarding starting with the game idea. I actually have a game idea, and I was thinking maybe to partnering up with some companies who have experience in developing a game. So how much are the chances increased to find partners if you make, let's say, a proof of concept, and how far in detail should someone go in order to find partners to embark on a game journey, let's call it that way?
Too much, Scott, if I answer first, because I was talking to some of my mentees just today. I would say nowadays it is kind of like the first step to start to find partners is to have enough to show the fun of the game. Usually nowadays you need to have a playable for that front. So, you know, your basic idea in a playable state so that it is actually fun to play, and it is actually something that will get the player to kind of start to have their own ideas that what could be also on top of that, be that player then a development studio, publisher, investor, or just your friend. Your friends are a great place to kind of, you know, test your ideas first, because when they play it and they start to come up with ideas, then you kind of know that there was something fun that was, you know, that was a little bit of contagion. There was a little bit of that magic that Scott was talking about.
Yeah, Yoni, you came up with you said an amazing point there, and that was like that magic that we were talking about before. That passion. What it really is fun, right? Games have to be fun, and you know, you do need that playable sort of the vertical slice to be able to show people what the concept is or what the value proposition is for the player. You know, it's and it really comes down to that. It's, you know, sure, art style is going to have something to do with it. Your experience is going to have something to do with it. The level of detail and planning that you've put into the project is going to have something to do with it, because let's face it, making a game is not a cheap endeavor. But, you know, it always comes back to that one point. Is it fun to play? I mean, is that fun? Is that going to be the magic that is going to make people go, wow, I really want to try this? And you know, so yeah, you really need something to show people that you know, is representative of what that sort of gameplay hook or gameplay loop is going to be.
Okay, Tammy, I think I hope this answers your question. Gentlemen, thank you very much for that. Oh, there you go. Thank you from Dummy. Okay, I believe there was a question that was posted on YouTube right here. This one's a bit of a specific one, and considering that you're not necessarily, you know, music people, we do have one viewer who has actually asked, could you elaborate about your thoughts regarding interactive music when it comes to games? And the reason why this person is asking is because this person is very interested in stitching problems for music, since they're building one themselves right now for a game. Did you have any opinions about interactive music, perhaps?
Well, I'm assuming that it's just, you know, music for an interactive project or a multimedia project, right? But I think one of the interesting, I mean, that's a whole other live stream.
Hang on, maybe I should actually elaborate on that one. Interactive music is basically music that procedurally changes depending on the environment, on the game environment, depending on what's happening in the game, right? So it's not a linear one that just plays in the background. It would literally change depending on what's happening in real time procedurally in a game. So yeah, sorry, just thought I'd clarify that perhaps.
Yoni, do you want to?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to throw a few ones. Think about, for example, Doom Eternal was doing that a little bit. I think Mortal Kombat have been doing it already. When you start to get a combo, the music is kind of starting to, you know, to pick that up. The you know, the higher you go in the combo. And there was some other good example that I had in mind that just escaped. But kind of like, you know, I think I might know the person writing this, but it's kind of, I think that's what they're going after.
Okay, fair enough.
So well, I mean, you know, I'm really not sure on the technical application, but if you want to talk about copyrights and musical copyrights in games and licensing music for games, like, I'm your man. So
conversation you and I will have someday around once the world would let us do that. But okay, gentlemen, sorry to the audience out there, whether it's in the call or on YouTube. Does anybody else have a question? Otherwise, I do have, you know, more that I can actually raise for these gentlemen. please raise your hand interactively, or just feel free to type your question in the chat window. None so far? Fair enough. Then I will ask this one for which hopefully is going to come in handy. Is going to come in handy for people out there who are indeed shopping around for a possible publisher such as yourself, Scott. So for those that have never, for those studios or teams or even solo developers who've never actually pitched a game to a publisher, what would you, and this one is directed at you as Feardemic, what would you, what would you recommend to these studios or to these teams who want to pitch their games to you?
Well, essentially, the most important thing is, as we talked about before, a vertical slice. I mean, there has to be some sort of playable sort of demo. It'd be very rare, unless your name was Hideo Kojima, that we would be willing to take on a game just on the experience of the person or on the name or experience. So that's the primary thing. Secondly, presentation materials, you're going to need a pitch deck. And thirdly, you're going to need a game design document. This is going to be really, really key because, if we are going to be prepared to invest in a games title, we want to know that in 2 years' time or 1 year's time, when it's going to be completed, that you're going to be able to complete it. And the only way, or the quickest way for us to get an insight into the way that you think, is to look at the game design document and see how you've planned it, how you've structured your team, how you've planned the various, whether it be an economy, whether it's various different levels, the SWOT analysis of it, or it gives us a level of comfort that you know what it is you're trying to achieve and that you're going to be able to get there on the day. And it doesn't really matter whether you're, got 20 years experience or 2 months experience. I've seen some of really fantastic game design documents from first-time game developers that are really, really thorough. And then on the other hand, I've seen guys that have made multiple games just sort of scratch something on a page and go, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. Usually when you hear that, you run away. But so the more that you can present a publisher that shows that you understand the whole process from the beginning through to the end, and that there is you're organized enough to be able to guarantee that at the conclusion of this project in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, that you are going to have a game to sell, well then that's sort of key to it. So don't sort of skimp on the game design document. I mean, that is a really, really important one. Even if you don't have a fantastic trailer, or you don't have a fantastically beautiful vertical slice, but there is some fun element to it, there's something there, the game design document will be the next one that people look at to really try and understand, okay, what am I getting myself involved with here?
Thank you very much for that, Scott. I actually have a follow-up question from Dummy that he's just posted on the chat. So Dummy asks, let's say my demo / proof of concept is a level. How much into detail should be delivered when it comes to content beyond that presented level? And how real is the fear of losing control over your own project by partnering up? It's intriguing as well as scary to him or to me, to be honest. That's what Dummy actually asks.
What I usually tell in the incubators when I'm talking with new studios is that you need to, every partner that you make in the future, you need to be making the right decisions. So yeah, there are possibilities that there's partners that, will kind of make you lose the control of your idea. But then again, on the other side, ideas are not special. The execution on those ideas and the outcome is what is special. It's the ideas itself no longer nowadays are exactly magical. If we look at Dark, for example, it is a dark puzzle platformer as an idea in a dream/nightmare scenario. Well, now there can be done so many different type of games, very bad ones from that, but also very great ones like Dark. So in a sense, never be too protective of your idea, because the execution is where the magic is.
Very good point. Scott, did you want to add a little point to that, or?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, ideas tend to be, a dime a dozen. I mean, it's always the execution that's the hardest. I mean, so it's kind of, if you're going to be defensive about your idea from the get-go, people are going to sort of go, no, because that's a sort of a red flag. Your idea, you should be able to put your idea on the table, and people should be able to understand it. You should be able to explain it without fear of them copying it, because usually no one's going to. There's so many ideas out there anyway. I think you have to be. Generally, publishers don't ask for an interest in the intellectual property, and I mean, I have heard that there are some out there saying, will give us your, control of the intellectual property. And generally, I mean, publishing is kind of like a glamorous term for distribution. It's not necessarily ownership of the IP. And I think any publisher that wants your IP, unless they're buying your business, of course, for a fair market value, are not going to ask for your IP. And once you are the owner of that IP, it's your responsibility to deliver that game. I mean, sure, publishers are there to support you, give you help, provide you with advice, if whether it be technical advice or advice on sourcing cutscenes or whatever, or the budget, or things that you need to execute your game. But the idea, is just it is just the idea. Focus on the execution, retaining the intellectual property, and you shouldn't have much problem keeping control over it. If you do lose control over it, it's not unheard of course. It has happened before, and it will happen in some stories again. Then it's probably because the team got too big, the project became too big, and it moved outside of its original borders or scope, and that's a completely different issue.
Thank you very much for that, Scott. Thank you very much for everybody who's attended this call. We're going to have to get it to a close, sadly, because we are marginally over time. But before we actually let everybody go, I just want to reiterate that, I mean, as you can see, Scott and Yoni are lovely and very approachable people. So I'm sure they won't mind if you actually reach out to them on LinkedIn or whatever, and then that way you can, perhaps establish a direct line if you're interested, or if you even have more questions. I'm sure the guys won't mind. And just to close this call off, I would like to once again thank you guys at the SAE Institute Group for having us and for organizing this. Thank you, Pan. And I hope this proved to be a very useful session for all of you out there who've watched this panel. Thank you very much. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Yoni. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you, Mehdi. It was great. It was great fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. I think we're going